Hey everyone, it's JT and welcome back to another live stream. So excited to have you all here today. I'm going to be talking about how to answer the dreaded question, tell me about yourself in job interviews. This is something that comes up all the time in the Work It Daily platform. And, as I'm getting ready here and bringing this up, I'm thinking of that, just this past week, how many people we've been prepping for interviews, big interviews that they have. And this question, while so simple, it can be one of the trickiest to answer. So I really want to dive in deep today on this and make sure that you understand what to say and how to say it. But before I do that, I have to remind everybody, because we're broadcasting on 5 different platforms today, which still blows my mind. I can't believe that we're able to do that. But it's really important to me that you know that the only way you can get your questions answered during the live session is if you are following me on LinkedIn. It's just how it works. The actual comments are on LinkedIn. You have to go over to the LinkedIn to my page, my profile page, and you have to hit the follow button. If you are actually following me, my profile on LinkedIn, it will then enable you to not only get instant notifications when we go live, which we do several times a week, but also it's going to enable you to get in there and ask your questions in real time. And my coworkers here are pulling all of your questions from the LinkedIn feed, and only the LinkedIn feed. It's the only way I can access them. So totally okay if you're watching on one of the other platforms. We're glad to have you here. Sit back and relax. But if you are itching to ask a question, you're going to want to go over to LinkedIn, follow me there so that you can access it. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get back to it because I want to get down to the business of talking about this question. So first thing, as I said, this is what's called a tricky behavioral question. So how many of you know what a behavioral question is? Raise your hands in the feed. If you do, say yes or no. I want to see how many people know what a behavioral question is. Yes or no, really quick, put it in the feed. Okay, all right. So while you're popping that up, let me explain. Behavioral questions have become a very popular technique in modern recruiting today. It's something a lot of recruiters have been taught to do. And essentially, it's when we ask you an open-ended question. So this is going to be a question that requires a more than one-word answer. And the reason that behavioral questions are asked, just think of the term behavioral question, is that while you're talking, we're observing your behavior. Specifically, we're looking at your personality. So your voice tone, your energy, what you're saying, how you're saying it. We're trying to get a sense of who you are from a personality standpoint. We're trying to understand your aptitude, meaning how do you approach things? How do you view tasks? How do you get things done? What's your methodology? And then obviously we're trying to understand whether or not you have the actual experience. So an open-ended behavioral question gives us insights into the kind of person that you are so that we can make a determination of whether or not your combination, your unique combination of personality, aptitude, and experience would in fact do well, thrive in the company culture. The reason this has become so important is that everybody in recruiting, if you've ever hired somebody who had all the experience, they were the most experienced person, but their personality or their style did not mesh the corporate culture, knows it's an epic fail. It's an epic fail. So this is why it's very important that recruiters assess people based on this, hiring managers, et cetera, before they bring somebody on. You're very expensive. You're going to cost them thousands of dollars. I've said this before in the live stream. Let me mention it again. It costs about 130 to 140% of your salary to hire you. Companies have to pay additional taxes, training, et cetera, office expenses. So it's no small thing. And they don't want to get it wrong. So you have to make sure that somebody is going to be a cultural fit for the organization. And behavioral questions are one of the techniques they're using to do that. So like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, behavioral questions are the new normal. And asking the question, tell me about yourself, is a very common one. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, let's look at this question, because what I need to do is reframe how you look at it and what they're really asking you. That's the secret to success here. So what they're really asking you when they say, tell me about yourself, is what do you do? I've seen a lot of people make the mistake if they say, tell me about yourself, and all of a sudden people roll into TMI mode. If you know what that is, too much information. They get really personal. They tell this very long story. They're sort of all over the place, and it backfires on them. So when asked this question, they're looking to make sure that you've thought about this in advance, and you really want to communicate a brand. You really want to get across to them something very succinct about yourself. Having the capacity to answer this question correctly is key. Now, sometimes when they say, this question, tell me about yourself. Sometimes they're asking, hey, walk me through your resume, or, take me chronologically through your work history. And you can always clarify that. You can say, all right, do you want me to take you through my work history, or do you want me to just kind of give you an overall summary about me as a professional? So you're totally welcome to clarify that if you want to. And I've done that in the past. But I will tell you, you can never go wrong by answering this question with this sort of personal branding statement that you create that helps them understand what you do. Because you're not going to say, when we get asked the question, what do you do? The biggest mistake people make is they actually answer it with a noun. What do you do? Do is a verb. They're asking for you to understand, like, what do you do? But society has trained us to answer this question with our label, our noun, right? So I'm an accountant, I'm a marketing director. And the problem with that, as we know, is that it creates judgment. In fact, yesterday, I did an article on LinkedIn. If you didn't see it, I wrote this on LinkedIn, and we're going to pop the link in for you. But I wrote all about that there's really a better way to answer the question, what do you do? And that all of us, as awkward as it is to not give them the 1 or 2 word answer, right? Like, not for me to say I'm a career coach, but instead to give them my personal branding statement, as odd as that feels, because it's going against society's norms. When you've done it a few times and you get over the initial look of the person going, wait, what? You see how much value this branding statement has, how it enables you to let people really understand who you are, and how to remove a lot of initial judgment. Because this thing is so important to me. I want you to think about this. The human brain, and if you read my quote here, the human brain is literally designed to process thousands of experiences a day. And so what it has to do is process it and label it. It attaches feeling or meaning to these experiences, and it puts it away like an old-fashioned Rolodex. It files it away. And then when some similar experience comes up, instead of having to reprocess from the beginning, our brain naturally pulls up all the files on that subject and forms an opinion. And this was designed so that humans could react, they could evolve, they could work at a faster pace, leveraging this. This is why our brains are so evolved. The problem with it is that it's literally how we create judgment when it comes to careers. Because if you just respond with, I'm an accountant, I'm going to think about every reference I have on what an accountant is or isn't, what kind of personality they have, all those sorts of things, any accountants I've worked with in the past. And I'm now going to pass judgment on, initial judgment at least, on you, bias on you. And this has been a pet peeve of mine for as long as I've been a career coach. You should not answer the question with just your job title. You should be answering it with your branding statement so that you can shape the message. You control the narrative. You get them to understand who you are instead of them making assumptions based on whoever they've met in the past. Okay? So let me explain why that's important. Let's go back here. Let me go back here. If I know when they say, tell me about yourself in the actual job interview, if I realize that's also very similar to meeting somebody who says, what do you do? Okay, I can use the same response in both of those situations. So I'm getting a 2 for the price of 1. If I develop and craft a really good personal branding statement, I'm now able to pull that out in these job interviews and shape their initial thoughts around me and show that I've given some serious consideration to what I want to say here. Does that make sense, everybody? If it does, put a big yes in the chat for me. Okay. So again, same thing as what do you do, which means it's about time you tell a story. Storytelling matters. Now, I've mentioned this week on the feed before, and I'm going to tell you again, I read this fascinating article around some studies that show that people that are good storytellers are perceived as more attractive. And that's because people that can tell good stories earn more trust and respect. The assumption is if you have the capacity to tell this story, then you've had experiences that enable you to shape that story. And so some of you are going, well, wait a minute, JT, that's not fair. That means that, really great talkers, smooth talkers, shady people, are going to excel. Yeah, that's unfortunate, right? We know that. We all know somebody who can talk a good game. But I also don't think you have to be some sort of crazy extrovert to tell a great story. I think if you can think your stories through and be very intentional about what you say and how you say it, anyone can be a good storyteller. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room, right? But you do have to be able to articulate your stories because they matter, especially when it comes to personal branding. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at how do we answer this question, what do you do? Or in this case, in the interview, tell me about yourself. There are 3 things that you want to say that you want to get across. You ready? First thing, you want to talk about the thing that you most love about your work, the thing that you do, right? And why it's important. So that's pretty key, okay? The thing that I most enjoy doing within my work, within my skill set, and why that's important work to do, in my opinion, right? The second thing I need to talk about is I have to explain how this solves a problem, alleviates a pain, or makes people feel better. So I have to provide some context. This is where the storytelling comes in to help the listener understand why this is important work and why I love to do it. And then the last thing is I need to close by talking about how I'm using this passion to focus on a bigger problem right now. So how am I applying my passion, my knowledge, my skills, my expertise in order to add value or to create even more value? And this is very important because subliminally, right, what you're doing through this 3 parts is you're saying, first of all, I know what I'm good at, and I know why it's valuable. Secondly, here's why you should know it's important and valuable. Let me explain so you can understand it. And third, now let me tell you how I learn and grow as a professional, how I make sure that I'm staying relevant and that I'm continuing to add value by letting you know what I'm focused on next. This is a sign of a truly dialed in expert. And the beautiful part about giving an answer like this is they can say, wow, like, let's talk about that. Okay, let's go. Now that you've shared with me a little bit about yourself, you've branded yourself. Now let's go over and look at your resume. Let's talk about this. This is your opportunity. This is a soundbite. And this is your opportunity to implant in the person's head your soundbite. You're controlling the message. All right. So I want to give you an example. Obviously, I'll use myself as an example because I practice what I preach. And I wrote about this in the article as well. So instead, when I meet people, it would be very easy. In fact, if I don't want to have a career conversation, if I don't want to get into it, the right thing to do is just say, I'm a career coach. Tell me about yourself. I'm a career coach. All right. That's the fastest way to shut down a conversation ever, right? What do you do? I'm a career coach. Maybe they'll be interested, but I've really not opened that up. So instead, what I want to do, and by the way, I've timed this. When I deliver this, it takes about 15 seconds. So it's not, a big thing, but I'll read it out loud to you. It says, and when they say, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself. Well, I help people grow their careers because if your career isn't growing, it's dying today, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there lacking the right information needed to make things better. My job is to help them remove the roadblocks so they can see a clearer path to success. And these days, I'm focused on helping people understand how job search really works so they can find a new job or change careers faster. That's it. 3 sentences. But in that moment, I've told a story that is going to implant in their brain. I have now defined what career coaching is by my definition. And hopefully, if it's been interesting enough, they'll say, really? Okay. And usually somebody's got their own story. They want to get into it and we go from there. Okay. But why waste that opportunity on saying something that doesn't make sense or that rambles? This is the perfect balance of information to provide when you're in that job interview and they say, tell me about yourself. This is a perfect soundbite. It's not too little. It's not too much. And it shows you've really been thinking about this question. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? It's so important that you do some work around this question because it's a tricky one. Now, last thing I'm going to say, practice, practice, practice. I know that sounds crazy and people go, but JT, I don't want to sound canned in the interview. I don't want to sound rehearsed. I don't expect you to sound rehearsed. I'll tell you what happens. People don't read through their interview prep enough. So at Work It Daily, when our members join, we have this entire tutorial on interview prep. Every stage of the interview, you learn, there's a video. And one key part is we give you 18 behavioral questions. They're the most common behavioral questions you're going to see. And people write out their answers to every single one. Then they submit them to the coaches and the coaches can take a look at them and say, yes, you're answering that one right, or you're not answering that one right. Okay. So they review all the way through it. But then we say to them, all right, now you need to keep reading these to yourself. Keep reading them out loud to yourself. Read them over and over and over again till you are sick of your own voice. You are so done listening to these answers. You've read them a million times. The reason for that is when you get in the interview and now your nerves are a little up because you're nervous because you want to do well. You want to make a good first impression. When they ask you, that positive energy, that excitement of, I know the answer to this, is going to come through. And while you're not going to have it memorized, you're going to have committed enough of it to memory that it'll come out sounding more natural and normal with a lot less ums, ahs, sort of over here, ending up over here, forgetting. You'll be more dialed in on your answers. And I just can't stress this enough. You know, if it's already hard enough to get a job interview today, to blow a job interview because you don't practice your interview prep questions, shame on you, right? We have got to take our job searching up to a higher level these days. People don't like it. They don't want to hear that, but this is a job, right? This is a customer that's willing to pay you thousands of dollars. You want this job, you've got to do your homework. So practice, and practice some more. Okay, folks? It's really important you do that. And as you get better and better at this, it gets easier and easier. Awesome. Okay, I want to stop there and see if we have any questions on this. Hopefully it made sense. If it made sense, give me a big old yes so that I know that it made sense to you. That would be awesome. Otherwise, I'm going to come up on the screen now and take some questions from all of you. See if I can do that. There we go. Let me bring the questions up. Again, just a reminder, if you're watching, if you just joined us, we're streaming on 5 platforms today, but we can only answer questions on the LinkedIn platform. It's just the way it works. So go over, follow me on LinkedIn, and it will give you access to be able to ask your questions. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's start with Sharath. Shout out to Sharath. How do we know what they're expecting to hear in the first place if they don't mention specifics? Tell me about yourself is broad. It is broad. I totally agree with you. So Sharath, I hope what I showed you today is when they open a broad question, again, they want to see where you go with it. So think about it. If you get into, well, I was born in this country and then I moved here and then this happened when I was 5 and then this is how I got interested and then I went to college and then what's coming across is you like to talk about yourself. You can't really dial it in, right? So you don't want to do that. They ask that question broadly to see if you understand how to pull it together and deliver something not too short, not too long, which is why I just gave you this framework. This is a foolproof framework as long as you apply the techniques, okay? Yeah, it's intentionally tricky. Awesome. Francis says, so how do we create our own brand? Creating an organization brand took 2 years in executive leadership meetings and conventions. Help. Yeah. Branding is not as easy as people think, right? So that's a great question, Francis. In our world at Work It Daily, we actually have a personal branding course where we take people through that process. It's not as hard as you think. You have to take a look at what you believe and then how you take those beliefs and those values and you translate them into content and context in order to do your brand. So it's not something that you do in an hour. You are absolutely right. But also, this is your business of one. How much do you all care about being employed the rest of your life? How much of you care about growing your career and getting the best opportunities and the most satisfying career path? If the answer is yes, put a yes in the chat, then understand, as Francis is putting out, that you need to work on your career. And it's something that I harp on all the time here. Working in your job day to day, folks, is not working on your career. And I know Francis knows this. Working in your job every day is just you executing. You need a strategy for your business of one. You need to step away from time to time and work on the career strategy and how you're going to grow the career. Branding is one of the ways that you do that. So I would strongly advise you to research and look into some personal branding courses. Obviously, we have them at Work It Daily, both for executives and for professionals, and we can take you through it and help you build your brand. We're just one option, but whether you use us or not, folks, it doesn't matter. To Francis's point, branding isn't something you just kind of do by accident. It's not, a 3-step process that's done in an hour. This is something you need to choose to invest in. But I will tell you the dividends, the return on the investment is huge because in this day and age, brand or be branded. We are all a commodity. I need you to understand that. We are all a commodity. There are lots of us. We are all fungible. Look up the term fungible. It means we can be replaced. So when you're a commodity, what happens is you compete on price. And that's a scary thing. Because if you think about the workforce, you've got all the new people in the workforce, young with no experience, who are willing to take a lot less money. Then they start to gain some experience and gain income, gain experience, gain income, gain experience, gain income. But eventually it doesn't stop. This is where most people forget the law of supply and demand. It doesn't stop. Eventually it peaks, especially if you don't think about how to continue to grow your career and keep it relevant, which most people don't. And what happens is they get comfortable. They don't pay attention to the market changes. And all of a sudden, boom, they're going down the other side of the bell curve, which is I've got too much experience and there are not as many jobs for somebody with my level of experience. And there's a lot of people competing for those jobs. And oh yeah, some of them are coming up here and are less expensive and companies would rather hire them, which is, again, gets into the very delicate conversation, age discrimination. I have a lot of very angry people out there right now about age discrimination. And when I talk about law and supply and demand, they get really angry. But the truth is that is what's happening. Don't shoot the messenger. So you have got to work on your career, and brand is one way you do it. When you don't want to compete on price, when you don't want to be screened out because of experience, the solution is brand. When you're branded as a specialty, when you're known for solving a problem, for alleviating pain, when people know who you are and what you do, you will have more opportunities. And a lot of people, and this is hard because they didn't teach this in school and none of us knew we had to do this. And then all of a sudden social media came along in the last 10 years where this is really hurting people are people who have not been social media savvy, who have not built a network and connected with people on social channels. And now all of a sudden they're struggling to find jobs and they don't have a brand. So they're competing on price. They're a commodity. So branding is huge. It is not to be taken lightly. I think clearly we probably need to do that. I'll work with my teammates. We'll do an upcoming session on that and talk more about it. Because as you've pointed out, Francis, here, opened a can of worms. It's not an easy thing and it needs to be done. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Liz says, how do you phrase it that you're not employed? So Liz, you don't need to phrase that. If they want to ask that question, they'll ask it. You don't need to offer that up, Liz. Even though what I love about the answer, this personal branding, is it doesn't matter if you're in a job or not. What do you love to do? Right? Just because you're not actively working right now does not mean you're a professional with skills. There is work that you love to do. You just might not be applying it to a particular job at this time. So you still answer this question and you still explain why it's important to you and what you want to focus on next, which hopefully, by the way, aligns with the job that you're interviewing for. But a lot of people get hung up in that. They feel like they're supposed to somehow incorporate it in. The employer usually knows if you're not working. But just because you're not working doesn't mean you can't answer that question in the way that I've described it. In fact, it's even more reason why you should. Yeah. Awesome. So Mayank is asking, what are the key points from our job summary which can help us frame our brand? So what Mayank is asking about is the job description itself. So a really fun technique, if you've never tried this, folks, is to take a job description, a job posting for a job you're really interested in. Go over and find one of the free word clouds on the internet, like wordle.net or wherever. Just search word cloud and you'll find one. Take all the text from the job description, throw it into the word cloud and see what comes up. Because for those of you that have never seen a word cloud, the words that come up the most, that are frequented the most, that have the most counts, they come up bigger in the word cloud. And so what you should do is look at what the top 5 or 6 big words or phrases are in the word cloud, and that will tell you that came up multiple times in the job description, which means this is the stuff they care about. Now you can craft that branding statement to include some of those things so you're actually speaking to what they're looking for. Okay? It's actually really fun. That's how we teach people to do it inside Work It Daily. You can do it too. Let's say Emanuela says, how long do we need to talk about ourselves for each question? I'm confused with the duration of each answer. That's such a good question. It's not about duration. It's not about duration, Emanuela. It's about quality of the answer. Because I've sat there before and listened to somebody explain something for 5 minutes and hung on every word and said, that was such a great answer. And I was fully engaged and glad they shared it. I've also interviewed somebody who 30 seconds in, I was like, please make it stop. And, they didn't come up for air and I literally had to cut them off 3.5 minutes in. So it's about the quality of what you're saying. Now, the solution to that is a framework for your answers. At Work It Daily, we teach the experience plus learn equals grow framework. And so in our video tutorial, we walk you through every answer. How do you do that? And it's very simple in theory, which is you map out an experience, you share a story that provides context. So it says, hey, you asked me this question and here's an example. Then you talk about what you learned from that. So because it's very important as a professional that we show that with every experience we're learning. And then we want to talk about how we're applying that learning for growth. So it's what you're showing the employer is, hey, this is what happened. Here's what I learned from it. And now here's how you're going to benefit from it. Here's what I'm going to do going forward. And this is how you get the added value of this experience that I had. right? So you're trying to show your worth. The Experience, Learn, and Grow model is a great way to keep your storytelling on track. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. And it creates a flow that's very followable. So people can follow along and go, okay, this is very logical. This makes sense. This person, again, is staying on track with their answer, which means whether it's 10 seconds or, 100 seconds or whatever it takes, it's going to be okay because you're being relevant. So it's far more important to have the right framework for answering questions and less important to worry about how long. Now, I will say this. I've seen people use the framework and they don't speak enough, in which case we'll tell them, hey, these answers are too short. Or, hey, this is an epic novel. Even though you're following the framework, you put in way too much stuff. Let's pare this down. And once you start to learn that right cadence, you'll know. All of you here, and you can tell me right now, you fall into one of two extremes. You either tend to talk not enough or you tend to talk too much. This is how everyone is. It's just the way we are. So whichever one you know instinctually that you fall into, you would want to be thinking about either beefing up your answers or paring down your answers, which is why you do interview prep, which is why you write the answers out, edit them, and read them to yourself repeatedly. Okay, awesome. So Jasmir says, what about when they ask multiple questions and the ones like they say, walk me through your background, tell me about yourself and why this company? Well, so again, those are three separate questions. Walk me through your resume is a chronological story of why did you go to this job and then why did you move to this job and why did you move this job? They want to hear the mentality. You're a business of one. You're a service provider who changed customers. Why did you decide to essentially fire this customer and hire this customer? They need to understand that journey and how it served you and made you a better professional, right? The second thing is the whole idea of tell me about yourself. Well, we just walked through how to answer that. And the third thing is why this company? Well, now you're tying your brand. This is a whole separate conversation, but it's around the fact that I'm a business of one and I want to build a business partnership with you, the employer. So let me talk about why I see this being a strong partnership. How do I see this being a win-win? What kinds of problems am I going to get to solve for you, which happen to be the kinds of problems I love to solve because that's where I get the majority of my satisfaction, right? You have to show them why this is going to be a really good synergistic fit. What they don't want to hear, by the way, when you say that question is, why this place? Please don't start talking about the benefits. If you say, well, I heard you're a top employer to work for, they know that. They didn't ask you what you want to get out of it. They want to ask you, why are we a good match? Why are we a good fit for our two business models? Why is your service model going to work well for me here at this company? That's what they're really asking there. Okay. Awesome. Can you use the same technique if you are changing careers? Absolutely, Lenny. Most definitely. How do you create a story for moms returning to work after a long gap? Yeah, so that's a great one. We do a lot of work with moms who are onboarding back into the workforce, and dads, by the way. Lots of people are taking time off. Now, it's not even about moms and small kids. A lot of people are having to take time off to care for parents, aging parents, right? So for whatever reason, if you've had some sort of gap in your resume, there needs to be a really good story there. And again, you've got to step back and say, what is the story? I can't make it up, right? What is the story? Why did I take the time off? Why am I coming back now? What skills do I most want to leverage now? How are they going to solve problems? Why is that important to me? And what do I want to do next with it? It's no different, but you are going to have to explain the gap because it's there and you can't hide from it. Yeah, definitely. Let's see. How do I explain temp positions that I've had? So again, every single person's different, but I think Doug, by the way, who's asking this question, it's very important that you spend some time with someone talking that through because there's a reason you went from temp position to temp position. And there's probably like one version of that story. And then there's one where it should talk about the skills that you built and then the new skills that you built and how you're tying those skills together and how you're using them. So when any kind, whether it's temp jobs or your past history, folks, your job is to connect the dots, not just say, I did this here, I did this here, I did this here, I did this here. It's, I did this here and it taught me this, and this is how I grew. So then I was able to apply it here. And then here I learned these other things, took that together and used it here. And then when I was here, I learned this whole new skill set, did these things, and it was able to elevate me to take all of this and use it here, right? So you've got to show them that all along the way, you've been experiencing, learning, and growing, which is why our model works so well at Work It Daily. When people, it's like stealing the opponent's playbook. I'm not kidding. Like once you learn how to do this, it becomes so natural to you to connect the dots. You realize they don't know how to connect the dots. They're not inside your head. They didn't live your life. They didn't do those jobs you did. So you have all the freedom in the world to explain the learn and grow process, which is what they want to hear, right? They want to understand through this process, how did you become the professional that you are today? That's what they're asking. Awesome question. Let's see. What question? Sean says, how do recruiters perceive intermittent stutterers during interviews? Look, I've interviewed people who have a stutter before. I understand that stutters are usually triggered, and they're usually triggered by nerves. My advice to you is to go on the offensive when you get there and say, heads up, I'm super excited for this opportunity. Also makes me a little nervous. I can be an intermittent stutterer. So if something trips me up, it just means I'm really concentrating. And when people understand that, everything, you get to relax because you now know they know. So you're not wondering what's going to happen the first time they hear it, right? And they're going to be able to say, oh, let me make you feel more comfortable. Let me make you feel more welcome. So it is really important that you share something like that so that that nobody's caught off guard, right? When we have something about ourselves that we're afraid the reaction, we should go on the offensive. We should brand it proactively. Right? People are understanding. Recruiters really get it. Let's see. Mariam says, how do you write a good CV if you don't have enough experience? Oh, well, that's a whole subject for another day. Your resume can't be made up. Your resume are facts. It is what it is. I've seen a lot of people try to beef up their resume. Recruiters are savvy, folks. This is what they do for a living. They can spot BS a mile away. You are better off writing a very simple factual resume. And hey, it's light. It's not even a page. Fine. What you have to do is tell them a great story. So where it's going to get more important for you is not the CV, it's the cover letter. The cover letter needs to be a disruptive cover letter that tells them the story about why you are passionate about the company and helps them see you and say what he or she lacks in experience, they make up for in enthusiasm and no bad habits, right? So it's a brand message. So it's very important that you have a disruptive cover letter and that you heavily network because you're going to need referrals. There's no gaming the resume system. It just doesn't work. Awesome. Let's see. JT is highlighting achievements and excellent strategy to answer this question as long as you contextualize it in a way that can add value to the company. Yeah, absolutely. Just try not to overdo it. So it's better to tell the story of what happened and what the results were. So a lot of times people will not tell that part of the story and they'll just talk about their achievements and that comes off like bragging. So you have to be very careful. And I think that's what you're saying. Contextually, what you're doing is saying, here's what happened. Here's what my team and I did. And here were the results. And, by the way, they were pretty awesome, right? So it's more logical instead of like, well, one time I did this and I was so great. So you've got to really think it through, which is why you write out your questions, why you read them to yourself and make sure that they land correctly. Very, very important that we do that. But yeah, that will essentially, through that example, help them understand how you could also add value to their organization. Most definitely. Tell us more about body posture, body language. So that's very, very important. I'm not going to lie. I could spend a whole hour talking about that. Instead, I'm going to do you one better. And I will bring it up here really quick so that you guys have it. I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. All the stuff that I talk about here on the live stream, it's just easier to put it in one place. It's over at workitdaily.com/resources. So the reason I'm saying that is that if you care about body language, posture, and how you're being perceived, as well as how to interpret other people, we have a quiz over there it's a personality style quiz. And the results will give you a whole bunch of information about how to read somebody's eye contact, body language, facial expressions, hand gestures, and what yours say about you. Right. And I think that's very important because you should know those things. What we do is we show you the strengths of each style. There's 4 styles, but we also talk about the perceived weaknesses, which is very important that you understand your strengths, your personality strengths create your weaknesses in these environments. So, if you are outgoing and use your hands a lot and you're very animated, that can be great. But if you're sitting with somebody who that's not something they're comfortable with, it can be considered too much, right? So you want to understand how different personalities react to your own and your own communication style. All right. So great question. A lot to consider there. Very important to the process. Go take the communication style quiz, the personality quiz over on our resources page, and that will help you. Okay. Awesome. What are your thoughts about disclosing ADHD? Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the severity of your ADHD in terms of how well you have it under control or not. So to be perfectly honest, if you're looking at the job and you know that your ADHD is going to come out fast because you can't concentrate, you can't get things done on deadline, then it can help to really explain that, because what I don't want to have happen to you is you get the job and you're failing and they say, what's going on? And you go, well, I have ADHD, right? Because that feels like you hid something from them to get the job. And that's not fair. So it is important that, so many people have been diagnosed with ADHD these days. There's lots of treatments, and a lot of people are working to figure out, hey, what are my strengths? How do I leverage? Because there's strengths to ADHD, right? They're extremely creative. They can dial in, they can hyper focus on something. Just unfortunately, they can also lose track of time and have trouble meeting deadlines. So, knowing that about yourself, you can work that into a question. So let's say they ask you something like a behavioral question, like, tell me about your greatest weakness. That would be a beautiful time to say, hey, this is really hard for me, but in full transparency, I have been diagnosed with ADHD. Here's how I handle it. Here are all the techniques that I have, built up my arsenal. This is what I know, and these are my checks and balances, and this is how I keep it in check, that sort of thing. So it's a good time to bring it up when there's some sort of question that you can respond to and work it into the conversation, most definitely. But again, make sure that you can say, hey, I've been able to get this under control. This is what I do. This is how I do it. These are signs that maybe I'm off kilter, and you can say to me, hey, what's going on? That sort of thing. Work with them, right? You're a business of one looking for a business partner. You're not perfect, nor are they, right? Play up your strengths, talk about all the value you can create, acknowledge the fact that you're not perfect, that there's a weakness or two, but also talk about how you minimize those weaknesses. That's all you got to do. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. How do you overcome the conversation of being laid off during an interview? Look, being laid off is a normal part of the process. There are layoffs every single day. We're not even in a market correction yet, which will come, and that's when layoffs will really increase. But layoffs are the new normal. Companies have to evolve at such a crazy pace now in order to survive and compete. The rate of change in companies is unbelievable. So most big organizations now lay off annually. And people don't know that. It's like some sort of secret that nobody realizes. There are companies like Bank of America, I'm trying to think, HP. They're every year, these big companies, they sit and go, what's the worst performing 10% of the business? Let's cut the department. They just have to in order to stay agile and competitive. That's the new reality. So getting laid off is normal. People have it happen. Getting laid off repeatedly. So if I'm interviewing you and I find out you've been laid off from your last 5 jobs, now I'm starting to wonder why you keep being the one that gets picked. Is it your skill set's outdated? What's going on? But, if you had a career track record and, all of a sudden you got laid off, you shouldn't feel bad about that. That's the company. The company couldn't hire you anymore. It's business. It's what happens. And you just say, look, I got laid off. It was a surprise to me or it wasn't a surprise to me. We have to tell the story, tell the facts leading up to it. What did you learn from the experience? Because being laid off is a powerful experience. And, how are you going to make sure it doesn't happen again? What are you looking for next time around? How are you keeping your skills relevant? That sort of thing. So talk to them about how you took that experience of being laid off and you're using it to your advantage. You might not like it. You don't like the hand you've been dealt, but you're going to play it. You're going to do something with it. That's the answer I'm looking for when somebody's been laid off. Okay. Awesome question. Okay. Let's see. What if I'm recently retired and I want to return to the workforce? I'm considering another degree. Oh gosh, please don't get that degree unless you're just doing it for fun and you've got money to burn. To be honest with you. I mean, if the career you're looking to get into absolutely requires a degree, okay. But I just got to say, in this day and age, it's better to have a working education. It's completely your call. But from a financial standpoint, the return on investment on additional degrees and advanced degrees is very slim. Very, very slim. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? I have a lot of people, they go to school for 4 years. They can't seem to find a job. So they decide they're going to get a master's or an MBA because they like school. They're going to stay in school. They're like, well, I'll just knock out the extra degree now. They get out of that school and they still can't get anything but an entry-level job. And even then people are like, you're overqualified. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not overqualified. I've never worked. Yeah, well, you're underqualified and you're overqualified because you have an extra degree now. So you're going to want more money. And as soon as you get some experience, you're going to leave us for a better job. So we want the entry-level candidate with only the bachelor's. So you have to be really careful. And I don't know your situation, but please be very careful about going back and getting additional degrees. You only get degrees when they are 100% required for the career you want to get into, non-negotiable. And even then, I found there's ways to get around that. You go network, you start to figure out and say, look, I have all this experience, how to get my foot in the door at this company and eventually get into this field. A lot of times there's a way to bridge that gap that doesn't require the expense of a degree. So yeah, great question. All right. Let's see. How do you explain a restructuring termination discussion? So again, that's very similar to a layoff. You state the facts, you take the emotion out of it. You talk about how you've learned and grown. I see that a lot from people. Adriana says, why should we hire you if the other applicants have more experience? That's an awesome question when you get asked that. So, that's another one of those behavioral questions that we're looking to see your emotional intelligence and your intellectual humility. And this is something that I've been discussing here on the live streams. If you've never heard me talk about this, one of the biggest trends in 2020 and beyond is people who are extremely self-aware, who understand that, we're all commodities. None of us are necessarily better than. Intellectual, cockiness or intellectual superiority is me saying, hey, I'm better than somebody else. That is not playing well in this day and age. Instead, saying, well, you know what? That's a great question. I guarantee you've seen a lot of great candidates, and every single one of them is different, slightly different. So some have more experience. Maybe some have, a better personality fit or better aptitude or came from a certain company. We're all a little different. So I can't possibly say that I'm better than somebody else, because like you said, there are people here who technically have more experience. That said, let me explain my unique combination of strengths and how I think they're going to work well for this position. So then you go into, look, I don't have as many years of experience, which means I don't have as many bad habits, right? I'm not set in my ways. I'm going to be more open and more malleable to what you're looking for. But I do have enough experience that you're not having to train me from the beginning so I can hit the ground running. Right? I also have this, that, whatever. So you've got to step back and think about the pros and cons of having a more experienced person, inventory that, and then work that into your answer. But before you answer it, you have to be very clear to them that I don't think I'm better than. I think we all bring something different to the table. In their case, it's more experience. But let me tell you why going with somebody like me might provide a different outcome. Might be really worthwhile to go with me because I don't have bad habits. I know just enough to be able to hit the ground running, the things like that. You can play that up and get them to think about you in a different way. But that doesn't happen if you don't give some thought to it, which is, again, why I'm going to just harp one more time today, folks. If you don't have the most common behavioral questions, if you haven't downloaded them and you're not studying answers to them, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage when you go into these interviews. Because all it's going to take is one other person in this interview to have prepped better than you, and they're going to, win out in the interview process. So if you haven't already, I've got the resources page going across the bottom here. We have the 18 plus interview questions that you get asked. It's a document you can download. It's a PDF file. Go over there to resources, download it, start working on it. Really, really important that you do it. Awesome. Okay. Karina says, in conversation, body language plays 75% of the whole. What do recruiters concentrate more on? Yeah, we hear all these varying theories about how much body language, facial expressions, eye contact, voice tone, hand gestures. It's a whole package. And I do agree with you. I've said this before. One of my favorite quotes is by an actress named Doris Day, who said, people hear what they see. So to that point, if you're sitting in an interview and you're not making eye contact and you're not smiling, you're really intense, your body language is sending this message, it's a problem. And no matter how great your answers are, they can't get past the fact that emotionally you're sending out some sort of message of insecurity. So it is important that you get comfortable. And again, I will tell you that comes from interview prep. When you know your answer's cold, when you're so sick of hearing your own voice, you're going to get in there and be more relaxed and more confident and more yourself. And that's going to help you. That is why you do this rehearsing and you don't wing it like so many people do. So, my answer is, you can't really change who you are. You can work on it a little bit and you can mock interview. But the way our confidence comes out and that we can be the most natural in our best selves is by being prepared. Absolutely. It's funny. We had somebody come and interview at work at Daily, and it was a group interview situation. And she walked in and it was clear that she could tell by looking around the room that on that particular day, she was the oldest person in that group interview. Now we had multiple group interviews, but on that particular day, she came, she was the oldest person in the room, and and she could tell. And she immediately stiffened up. She spent the entire time in the group interview with her arms crossed, right? She looking around, her comments, the way she spoke, it was so evident that she was distracted by the fact that she was the oldest person in the room, that in spite of the fact that, she had great answers and she had experience, the whole team, we couldn't get past the fact that this person was so clearly uncomfortable, they were making us uncomfortable. And that's a shame, right? That's a shame. So you don't want to do that in an interview, folks. You don't. You've got to be prepared. You've got to go in. You've got to have the confidence. You got to practice, right? And you got to be prepared for what's coming, right? And that's so important. Yeah, it's tough. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and just say, wow, that was a lot. You guys did a great job. What I need from you all right now is, what was the most valuable piece of information you heard today? What was the most helpful thing? Because we're always looking at that in these live streams. All right. Really important that you do that. So everybody, please, right? I want you to take 1 minute right now just to put in the most helpful thing. That helps us and also helps us plan. The second thing that I want to tell you, besides going over the resources page, is right below here, right? I am on both TikTok and Instagram offering up advice. And the reason you're going, well, wait a minute, JT, I follow you on LinkedIn. Why do I need to follow you on TikTok or Instagram? Let me tell you why. You are the product of the people you spend the most time with. And right now, a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media. And I'm going to challenge you right now. Your social media feeds are probably filled with a lot of funny people, sense of humor, whatever, pastimes, hobbies, whatever. But are you really dialed in? And are you spending at least 10 minutes a day with people who are trying to elevate your game? Because the people you spend the most time with elevate your game. And never before has it been easier to follow people on social media as a way to get little bits of reinforcement, of positivity, of advice, right? So follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram. If we can spend hours a day, which people are guilty of, looking and liking all this random stuff on Instagram and TikTok, right? Facebook, whatever, you can take 10 minutes out of your day to learn something, to grow as a professional, to be inspired, to be positive. This is what we're trying to do. And so all I'm asking is, give me a chance to help you. I want to help you on these platforms. I want to make sure that you've got the best mindset every single day. And one of the best ways for me to do that is to get in your feed so I can get inside your head. Okay. Because that's what I'm here to do. All of you know it. My team and I, our goal in 2020 to help 1 million people grow their careers. And we're doing it here with these free live streams. So follow me on TikTok, Instagram. Let us keep it going. Let's get you to the next level. Okay. Awesome. All right, team. Thank you so much. I'll be back again next week. We'll have a whole list. If you're following me in my feed, you will see the topics for every day, high noon, what we're going to be doing. And you can get the recordings after the fact as well, too. So I will see you next Tuesday, okay? We'll be back again really soon, if not sooner. Sometimes I love to randomly hop on and live stream. But as far as our themed shows, they'll be next week. Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for stopping by. It was great to work with all of you. And I will see you soon, okay? All right. Take care. Bye-bye.